Assalamu alaikum. Okay guys, let me know if the sound's working. Hopefully it should be on. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is Surah Ar-Rum. Okay, reflections on Surah Ar-Rum. I don't know how many of you guys have had chance to look through the surah. If you have had chance, put in the comments and write down what kind of reflections you've got from this surah. So you can put that in the comments, inshallah. Can you guys hear me? Is sound working? Is it on? Okay, mashallah. Biz, wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah, you ready? Okay, so write down reflections that you got, inshallah, from that. And I'll try to mention some of the things that came to my mind as well when I was reading the surah as well. Alright, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, Surah Ar-Rum. So, some of the things that came to my mind when I read this surah. So that, inshallah, I'm going to try to do a few of these sessions, hopefully. But I'll try to mention some of the just overviews of the points that came to my mind. So one of them was Surah Ar-Rum. If you've read it, then you know that Surah Ar-Rum, it mentions about, the first thing that kind of hits you in the surah is Rum, which is translated as Rome. And wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, tiratai. So Rum is referring to, according to most of the scholars, it refers to Byzantine Rome, East Rome, which was the closest place to the Muslims, and it wasn't referring to like Italy Rome, right? Not that Rome. So this is the first thing that comes to you when you hear the surah, and this is actually the only time it's mentioned in the entire Quran is here. So the word Rum or Rome is not mentioned anywhere else in the Quran. It's only here it's mentioned. So that's one of the first things that pops out to you as well. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing that in this surah is there's lots of repetition in the surah as well. Right? So some of the words repeat themselves. So for example, you have, if you read the surah, you have the word ghalaba, which means to dominate or to overpower, and it repeats itself a few times. Sayaghlibun. So that repetition is there as well. And you also have like things like rain being mentioned twice. You have the Day of Judgment being mentioned in 2 places. So you have also a repetition of the signs of Allah as well. So in this surah, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, which is basically means from His signs, from the signs of Allah, it actually appears 7 times. So you have this mentioned 7 times in this surah. Okay. Another thing you get in this surah is, so you get repetition in the surah. You also get domination being temporary is one of the themes that you can understand from this surah. Well, this is what I got. So domination, in other words, Rome was overpowered. So it doesn't mean all of Rome was overpowered, but Rome was overpowered, meaning that there was a large group of them that were overpowered. Where was it overpowered? So it says fi adna al-ard, in the lowest land or in the closest land. The word adna can actually mean 2 things. Lowest, like the lowest depression on earth, and closest, adna can mean closest as well. And we don't exactly know who they are fighting with, although the tafsirs and narration mentions that it was the Persians, but the Quran doesn't mention them. The Quran just says غُلِبَتِ Ar-Rum. So domination is temporary, and this seems to be one of the things that pops out to me in this surah, which is that indication that people who disbelieve in Allah, and Muslims as well, they should never make for themselves a measure of success in the world by how many wins they get or how many defeats they get. So domination is temporary. So if you're dominated, even if you're dominated for a century or 2 centuries or 3 centuries or whatever, then it doesn't necessarily indicate towards you being successful or unsuccessful. That's not the measure for success. And this is one of the overarching themes of this surah as well, that throughout the surah, this idea that things will change, fluctuations will take place, right? So it gives the example of like the rain forming and the rain falling from the sky, and then plants growing, despite the land seeming as though the land was dead. So it kind of shows the idea that things seeming to be over and done with are not necessarily over and done with. They can come back. So maybe this is an indication as well about Rum as well. And interestingly as well, there is a narration that the Prophet ﷺ said about the attributes of the people of Rum, and he said he mentioned four attributes, and one of them was that these are the quickest people to actually recover from a calamity. So if they're hit with a calamity, these are the fastest people, or some of the fastest people that recover from it. And if you kind of look at the world wars that happened, right? So like in Europe, World War I, World War II. I mean, Germany and these countries, recovered very, very quickly. So their recovery rate was very fast. And this may seem to be something which the surah is indicating towards. Yeah, that this is the nature of these people. So even though they are disbelievers, even though their beliefs may be such, but their kind of recovery is something which is not necessarily attached to their belief, but it's just something which happens. So that's another thing. Okay, another point which I got from this surah is Allah is always in control. So Allah, lillahi al-amru min qablu min ba'd, that Muslims should never ever think that in the world the superpowers being dominant. So for example, like America or the UN or maybe even China, or such powerful armies around the world, we should never think that these people are stronger than Allah, and that Allah is not in control and these people are outside of the kingdom of Allah. No. Lillahi al-amru min qabl wa min ba'd. Therefore Allah is the matter, belongs the matter. Before all this happened, before Rome was dominated, and even after Rome dominates, Allah is still in control. And this is all part of the great plan, the divine plan of Allah that we can't understand. So Allah is always in control. And then it gives examples in the surah of rain. Yeah, like Allah is in control of the rain. Allah was the one that created the earth and the skies, so He was in control then. Allah is the one when the past nations came and they deviated and were much stronger, more powerful than the superpowers of the day. So even then Allah was in control, and their consequences can be seen if you travel the land. And even their system of shirk, or their deviated religious systems that they have, even they are something which you shouldn't be deceived of as well, because on the Day of Judgment that will not help them at all. And the signs of Allah, we should always be aware of the signs of Allah. Yes, Allah is, how do we know Allah is in control? So He mentions 7 signs of Allah. and those signs of Allah, vary. And we'll talk about the signs maybe if we get time today, or maybe another time. So that's the other thing. So before I continue, let me just see what you guys have written. So Ziryab, contemporarily, the Sassanids and the Byzantines were locked in battle at the time of the Prophet. Okay, so what we want to focus on is basically, we want to focus more on the surah. So like external facts, we don't want to make them the way that we understand the surah. So what we want to do is use the surah as the primary understanding, and then everything else, if it fits in with that, then we use that. Right? Otherwise, we don't want to kind of superimpose tafsirs over this. Right? That's the whole point of reflections, is that we can, just from the surah, we can see what we can get. Okay, next, it differentiates a lot between people who know and don't know, and the different ways in which they will behave on the Day of Judgment. Okay, yeah. Knowing and not knowing, definitely, yeah. That's one of the themes as well in the beginning, when Allah says they only know. The limit of their knowledge is the outer, superficial things of the world. Okay, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. I noticed the following pattern: promise of Allah, Day of Judgment, ayat of Allah, signs of Allah, ayat of Allah, Qiyamah, promise of Allah. Okay, yeah, definitely that's a pattern there. Yeah, so it's like a repetition that occurs. And this actually a good point, that is, because this repetition is like a cycle. This cycle that Allah is showing, like the rain cycle, and the water goes up and it forms clouds, and the clouds come down, and then it rejuvenates the land again, and then the plants grow, and then after a while they die, and then the system goes again. So it's like that. Humans are like that as well. So humans, they reach a peak in their civilization. All right, they become, they reach the highest level, and then after that, it kind of dies away. Right, they go into decline, and then they, vanish. And if you look in the past as well, that's what Allah is saying as well. Travel the lands, go to Egypt, look at the pyramids, go to Petra, look at the homes that they built, go to other places around the world, South America, these places, and you see how the people in the past, what they built and what's happened to them. Right, so it's like the surah is almost like a kind of cyclic sort of pattern it shows. Okay, very good. Yes. Repercussions of evil acts both in this world and the hereafter. Yeah, repercussions, definitely you have to remember that. So I mean, the surah does focus a lot on how things seem on the outside very nice, that Rum is a very strong, powerful, mighty kingdom. However, the reality is that they are not happy people. They're not successful. They are plagued with problems. Yeah, so not believing in Allah, not turning their faces to Allah, right, not following the fitrah, is always going to take you towards destruction. Yeah, so that's another thing that the surah seems to be talking about. That it doesn't matter how strong the system seems to be that humans develop, the government or superpower. If you don't have the ingredients that Allah is mentioning to us in the Quran, then we're ultimately going to be seeing another decline of that society. And it might not be now, but there will come a time when a decline will occur. So just like now, I mean, it just seems as though America is the superpower. A time could come where they could be destroyed. And just like Germany at one point became so strong, no one could defeat them. And then all of a sudden, the strangest things happened and they got destroyed. And likewise, other countries as well, even Muslim countries. I have noticed that there is a lot of mention of Allah's mercy in the surah. I wanted to ask if Ar-Rahman, the most common name of Allah, is used in the Quran. Okay, so in this surah, you actually don't have the word Rahman being mentioned. You do have Rahim being mentioned once. So Rahim is mentioned in this surah, definitely. Yeah, so okay, so in the previous surah, dunya is compared to a trap, but in this surah, Allah mentioned examples from our surroundings and within ourselves, so that we should contemplate. Definitely, contemplation is a big thing in the surah, like we said, looking at the signs of Allah in ourselves, signs of Allah in the universe, in the in the cosmos as well. These are all things that Allah is indicating to us, that we have to see the signs of Allah if we truly want to be able to understand, Allah's power. Okay, so that's what you guys have mentioned, and if you got anything else to mention, put it in the comments, inshallah, and I'll try to have a read of it as well. So continuing with what I came across, I've still got quite a lot of things to mention. So the fourth point that I mentioned was promise. So Allah in this surah mentions about the promise of Allah, right? So Allah is promising here that, Rome will become dominant once again in a number of years. So bid'a sini, a number of years. So in a number of years, they'll become dominant again. So this promise of Allah, this seems to be like a very key piece or part of our belief in the hereafter. So if you want your belief in your hereafter to be strong, you have to believe in Allah's promises. And one of Allah's promises is that we are going to die, and that we'll be resurrected, and that we're going to have to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So believing that what Allah has told us is going to happen is also important for us. So here as well, believing that, there is Allah, and believing that the message of the Quran is true, and believing that, these powerful superpowers are going to be destroyed one day, is also something which is, like we said, connected to our belief. Another point that I came across was humans are limited in their knowledge, right? So we're limited in how much knowledge, how much we can benefit from our own set of faculties that Allah has given us to gain information, right? So using our senses and the extension of our senses, various forms of sciences and various forms of technology to be able to extend our senses, all of these things at the end of the day are limiting. They're all limited, right? So this is what it means by يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنْ حَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. They only know the apparent nature of the world of this life of this world. So humans may think that they can reach, with the sciences and with everything else, they can reach the reality of this universe. They can't reach it. So reaching the reality of this universe is never possible for humans without intervention from Allah. So Allah tells us from the unseen, and then this gives us an understanding. So our minds can never ever perceive the hereafter. We need to be told this. It's like our minds can never perceive things that are going to happen to us after we pass away, or anything else for that matter. So again, here the idea of humans' limited knowledge. So in other words, people disbelieve in Allah because of their limited knowledge. They try to use their knowledge to create systems which are void of the teachings of Allah, or a distorted version of the teachings of Allah, which leads them to their own destruction. So knowledge is extremely important. And what knowledge is that? It's the knowledge that Allah, He gives to the messengers and the prophets. So this is another thing. And if you look throughout this surah, this is a common theme that you see throughout this surah. Yeah, so this, like, if you look at the signs of Allah, if you were to contemplate on those signs, you can only reach a certain amount. You have to be told something which is beyond that, right? So we can look at all the signs of Allah. It will reach us, that signs of Allah will only bring us to understand the existence of Allah, or a concept that Allah has told us about. So for example, like the concept of the hereafter, our minds can never perceive this. Yeah. However, by Allah telling us there is a hereafter, and then giving us in the Quran examples of things that make sense to us in this world, and then drawing an analogy with that, with the concept of resurrection in the hereafter, then it makes sense. So for example, like Allah gives the example of the dead land being given life again. So this is not the Aqidah itself. This is just like the way analogies are drawn. Right? So you draw analogy by saying, look at this, look at how the rain comes down, look at how this grows, and then look at how this dies, and then look at how it grows again, look at how it dies, look at how it grows again. Isn't it possible that if Allah can do this, that Allah can bring you back? Yeah. So these sort of like observational signs are a means for us to be able to become more certain about the things that Allah tells us from the unseen. So that's another aspect of it, right? So we've got that. And if you carry on in the surah, there's also this idea of, when humans themselves are left to their own understanding, it causes lots of problems as well in society. Interestingly, this surah does not contain mention of any of the prophets in this surah. Whereas last time we mentioned in Surah Ankabut, there were 7 prophets that were mentioned there. And this surah actually mentions no prophet at all. It simply just mentions about in the past, people came in the past, and they made a big impact on earth. They created lots of structures and things like that, lived for a long time. Yeah, and messengers came, but the messengers' names are not mentioned. So that's also an interesting thing here as well, right? About this, I don't know, maybe something came to your minds, or did you notice that, or did you not notice that? That's another reflection in the surah. But going back to the knowledge thing again, is the knowledge of, for example, like how a society should be funded, financial funding, that we have to believe that Allah is the one that gives sustenance to people. And if we believe this, then it doesn't matter where we are on earth, Allah will sustain us, right? And this is something, a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if a person does not distribute the wealth that comes to them in the correct way, this can also lead to the destruction of a society as well. So destruction of Rum may have also been due to things, for example, like a lack of correct distribution of the wealth. Maybe the rich got richer, poor got poorer, and it just destruction led to that as well. So that's another thing that this surah, or some of the reflections I got from that. Okay, what else was there? Okay. Next. Okay, let me see what you guys have written. Okay, Allah mentions towards the end of the surah that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam cannot change the way of the disbelievers. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had that power. So showing how limited we are on power. Okay, yes, okay, yeah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah being speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although not mentioning him by name, but Allah addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and saying that have patience, isbir, just bear it. And if you remember in the previous surah, the ending was about striving. Yeah, those who strive for in the sake of Allah, in the way of Allah, Allah will open up opportunities for them. And here it's saying, look, fasbir inna wa'dallahi haqq. Have patience, just carry on. Yeah, persevere in life. It doesn't matter what these other people are doing, just you carry on doing your thing. The promise of Allah will come. We have to have this, certitude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise is on its way, it's coming. And that's the hardest thing, because something you can't sense with your senses, something you can't see, and you think that the Muslims' situation is really bad. You need to have patience. The promise of Allah will come. لا يستخفنك الذين لا يوقنون. And those who do not believe, don't let them make you feel light. Don't make them feel as though you have no value, as though you have no weight in society. Yeah, don't do that. Just carry on, do your thing, do what you have to do. So yeah, definitely, I think that's a good point there as well. Okay, cycle of life is referred to weakness to strength, back to weakness. How amazing is it that Allah gives you strength and then He takes it away as well? Yeah, definitely, this is a very good point mentioned as well, about the cycle. So I think cycle is one of the main arching themes that we get in. Just like in the Surah Ankabut, one of the main overarching themes was the idea of the fake systems of shirk. Yeah, the fake systems of others who don't take Allah as their support and their help. So here as well, it's about the cycle, yeah, about the weakness, the du'f, and then the strength, the weakness, and then the strength, and then you kind of reach your peak. So it's like this kind of cycle, or it's like a pyramid, you can say. So you go up the mountain in your life, you become your strongest in the middle of your life, and then you start to drop, and then you become weak, and you can't help it. This is how it has to go. So you will never always be strong. You have to start off weak. You have to build it up. Yeah. So it's like kind of teaching us very important lessons about how patterns in society are patterns in life, right? So you're not going to always be strong. You're not going to always be weak. You need to make an effort. Like going up the mountain is the hardest thing. So you have to put lots of effort in, right, to get to your peak, but you will get there. But then after that, once you've kind of, exhausted your strength, you are going to start to see a decline, right? So societies show that as well. So society, even the Muslim societies, there's going to be this peak that the Muslims are going to be the strongest, and then it's going to decline. Institutes as well, organizations. So an organization will start off and then it reaches peak, and then afterwards it'll start to go down, decline. So you can't tell this except from a retrospectively. So you look at it from retrospectively, then you can see this peak and this trough. Otherwise, you can't tell now. So you can't tell if you are in a strong position at the moment. That's why you have to keep persevering. Keep persevering, but always remember in the back of your mind, it's not you're not going to be at your best all the time. Just like the Romans. So the Romans are persevering. They're not going to be the best all the times, and they lost. And this also is something which the Prophet ﷺ, he said in another statement of his, that there's nothing that Allah raises on earth except that He brings it down one day. So anything that Allah will bring up, He'll always bring it down. If He gives you life, a day is going to come, He's going to take your life away. If He gives you a top job, a day is going to come, He's going to take that job off you. If He gives you a big family, a day is going to come when the family will be taken away from you. Right? So this is the kind of ups and downs we're going to have in life. Okay. Anything else? Okay, Sharif wa alaikum assalam, showing us how to keep a clear and true inner and outer perspective no matter what. Allahu a'lam. Yeah, true. Okay, good. I'm trying to fully understand what you're saying there. How to keep a clear and true inner and outer perspective no matter what. Like, what are you kind of saying? Are you saying with regards to belief, or is it about how society works, or if you can explain that a bit more. Okay, I noticed that it almost mentions about the oneness of Allah and shirk. Yeah, so the oneness of Allah and shirk is like an important theme in the surah as well. All right, so it seems a lot as though how downfalls can occur. This is one of the things that's coming to our mind. Maybe this surah is indicating towards the downfalls of society, how societies will fall, and how societies come back up. Right, so this is something which Allah, He mentions. Okay, another point which I made a note of, which the nature of universe is temporal. Yeah, so the nature of the universe is temporal. So this is how things work. It's not that if you're a believer and you pray your 5 times salat and you read Quran and you give charity and you fast, that Allah is going to give you dominance over the world. Right, you cannot gain world dominance, let's say, for example, just by you fulfilling all the commands. In fact, if you fulfill all the commands, you might even be destroyed one day. You might even be murdered. You might even be tortured by some enemy or whatever. It might happen to you. So we have to understand the reality of things. We can't fake things, and we can't tell people a romanticized version of Islam. So we can't make things up to them. We can't tell them, look, if you pray your 5 times a day, you're going to get a top job. You're going, like we mentioned in Surah Ankabut, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. No. Because Allah tells us that, look, this is what happens to people. This is what happens to nations. Nations will fall, rise, and nations will fall. But the promise of Allah is that Allah will always, at the end of it, the Muslims are the ones that will have the last say. As in the Muslims, your iman is the thing that will, as long as you are obedient to Allah, in the end you are the one that's going to be successful. And that is referring to the life of the hereafter. Yeah, so this universe, the nature of the universe is temporal. And we see this in the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the rain falling from the sky and the plants dying, yeah, and the humans going through these, stages of weakness. You start off weak, you're a baby. And I mean, if you think about it, human children, babies, are probably the weakest out of all the animals, because all other animals can probably walk, very soon after they're born, or they can even fly very soon after they're born. And humans have to actually be trained for so long in this. So it's like the weakness. You're going through the stages of weakness, then strength, then weakness, then old age and death. Okay, so so that's a nature of societies is basically like this. Okay, another point. So again, if you got any more points, you can put them in there. Anything that comes to your mind, even if it comes now to your mind, you can put it up, inshallah. The other point that came to my mind was past nations rise and fall, like I mentioned. That was another point. So past nations, they rose and they fell, and this is what happens as well. Even Muslim leaders, right? They rose, they fall. It happened in after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ to many Muslim rulers. They came into power. They became very strong in Spain. Muslims came into power. They became very strong. They were at their peak, the golden era, and then they fell. So this going up and falling is something which is like we said, it oscillates. So at the moment, Muslims are quite low. But if you look at the patterns of how things work, Muslims will go high again. Yeah, so this is like, this surah was revealed in Makkah, and you can imagine in Makkah, the Muslims generally were being persecuted. So this was a implicit sign to the Muslims that they were going to reach their peak, that they were going to go up. Right? So again, for us, it's also a good sign as well. So if we're thinking that Muslims are being persecuted around the world, and this is going to be the case until the Day of Judgment, no. Muslims will rise again. A rise is going to come. Right? So this kind of peaking and troughing, like we said. So, past nations, they rose and they fell, and so Muslims will rise again. Okay, so the next thing that I wrote down was strength is no measure. Right, this is one of the reflections that I got. Strength is no measure. So this is not a measure of gauging of how powerful you are. Right, so for example, like having a powerful army, or having a powerful economy, or having a powerful whatever social structure, or whatever you have in your society. None of these are considered to be a measure of success. So these are all things that will rise and they will fall. Yeah, they'll come into a manifestation, they'll materialize, and they will dematerialize, they will disappear as well. So just like it happened with Rum. Now if you think about it now, Rum now, like this surah was revealed when Rum was probably, you can imagine, like America today. That's how strong they were. Just imagine that. So imagine someone telling you now that that America is gonna disappear. Yeah, it's gonna be defeated. It's gonna become weak. You probably wouldn't be able to imagine it, because the way that they're going at the moment with all their businesses and all their trade and all the army, military and all that. But this now, if you look at it now, Rome is actually like a historic thing that you study in the history books now. Yeah, a lot of people don't even know about Rome, and they don't even know that there was two Romes. Yeah, there was the Eastern Romans, and there was the Eastern European Romans, and there was the Western European Romans, and they don't know about their power. And those places that was stronghold of Romans today is actually now belongs to Muslims. Constantinople, Turkey, all that was the stronghold of the Romans, right? So when this surah was being revealed, that's what the Muslims were being told. And so think about it now like that. So like we said, strength is no measure, right? So obviously Muslims need strength, they should have strength, but it's just showing you how things work. Okay, let's look at what you guys have written. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. S. Khan. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in previous surah that the bonds between mushrikeen are only in dunya. They will forsake each other in the akhirah. And in this surah he says that the shuraka themselves will intercede, and the mushrikeen will actually disown the shuraka, will not intercede. Okay, yeah, so I think what you mean is the mushrikeen are going to ask for the shuraka to intercede. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. And yeah, definitely. That the people of shirk, the previous surah mentioned that people of shirk, they only have bonds, like the community is only gelled together. The people of shirk, their community is only gelled together because of fake love. So they created this fake system, and just for this fake love, they are doing all of this. How do we know this love is fake? Because if it comes down to the bitter truth, these people will forsake their own gods and idols. Right? They forsake them. So this surah, like S. Khan mentions, this surah mentions about on the day of judgment that their shuraka will not intercede on their behalf, and they're actually going to be denying their shuraka. Right? They're going to be lying, and they're going to be saying that we didn't believe in these. Yeah. So okay. So anyway, so I think that's a good point that you mentioned there. Okay, let's do one more, I think, and then we'll finish, right, for today. So the other thing that came to my mind, reflection, was failure is due to offenses. Yeah, failure will occur, people will fail when people start committing offenses. So if you remember in the previous surah, it was mentioned about about the shirk and about the crimes that they're committing, and ultimately these crimes were the crimes that were so evil that it was kind of like it was going to become a means of their destruction themselves. So the same kind of theme over here as well is mentioned, that the people are committing crimes. So it doesn't matter how strong system you develop. So if you've got some people together, a group of people, and these people all sat around and they said, okay, let's try to, from scratch, develop the best society ever. And they try to do that today with their policies. And let's try to develop the best education system and the best healthcare and the best, social projects and the best administration and the best law enforcement and the best military system. So all these things that they're developing, if they are not based upon belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all of these are going to lead to destruction. I'm just trying to find an example of this, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it. Okay, so here's an example of this. So in verse number 32, 31 actually, or you start from 30. Allah says, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ فَأَقِمْ. Where is it gone? Okay. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. Establish yourselves towards the religion, turning away from wrong, hanifan. Fitrat Allah. Go towards the fitrah of Allah. Go towards the natural disposition that Allah has created inside humans. التي فطر الناس عليها, upon which He's created the humans. لا تبديل لخلق الله. There is no change in the creation of Allah. ذلك الدين القيم. This is the upright religion of Allah, but most people don't know. منيبين إليه, returning back to Him. واتقوه, and protect yourselves, shield yourselves from His punishment. وأقيموا الصلاة, establish prayer. ولا تكونوا من المشركين, do not be from the mushrikeen, don't be from those people who make associates with Allah. Who are they? من الذين فرقوا دينهم, the ones who have taken their religion and broken it up into pieces, separated their religion, and they haven't made it holistic. كانوا شيعا, and they were supporters of their own little pieces. So they broke up their faith, actually the system that they initially developed. They're breaking it up, and then some of their followers, let's say there's 100 followers, 20 of their followers have taken one aspect of it, 20 of their followers have taken another aspect of it, and each one of them thinks they're right. كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون, and each one of them thinks they are right, like they're happy with what they've got, right? And they're just like, the entire life they're just, revolving around, orbiting around these small little points in their made up faith. Allah says, don't be like these people. Like, don't you make your religion like this as well. Because you Muslims, if you make your religion like this, if you just take certain aspects of your religion, like for example, someone just takes, for instance, maybe just doing dhikr, they just want to do dhikr, that's it. They don't want to care about any other aspect of their religion. Or some people just want to read Quran, that's it. Or some people just want to establish an institute for knowledge and do nothing else. Some people just want, so if everyone just does their own thing and think they're right, then they're not going to be working together, and ultimately that seems to be what had happened to the people of the Rum. So Rum seems to have destroyed itself. It had these problems, were plagued with, like we said, these illnesses, and Allah is telling us, don't be plagued by the problems of Rum. You will fail. You're going to be sometimes failing. You're going to be dominated sometimes. Sometimes you're going to dominate, but don't let these kind of things plague you. So that's one of the things, right, which like we said, which was the about the failures, is the offenses that you commit. Yeah, so if you commit the same offenses as the mushrikeen did in their religion, in their faith, made up faith, you're gonna be in the same position as them. Now then the verses go on, so I don't want to kind of spend too much time on this. Okay, so if you go to the next few, again Allah says the same thing again. He repeats it. So this is one of the things that I said in the beginning. Lots of repetition in the surah. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ الْقَيِّمِ, establish your face, establish your countenance to the deen al-qayyim, the upright deen. Allah is saying to the Prophet ﷺ, مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يَأْتِي يَوْمٍ, before such a day comes in which you can't be returned again. Yes, Allah is telling. And then after that, Allah says, actually before that, Allah says, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادِ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ, corruption, offenses have appeared, problems have appeared on land and in sea because of what humans' hands have committed, have earned. And why does this happen? لِيُذِيقَهُمْ, so that He makes them taste some of what they have done, so that maybe they'll go back to Allah. Yeah, maybe they'll return from their evil ways and become good again, realize. So this is like a system that Allah has created in the earth, that whenever humans start doing bad things, it has like a ripple effect on earth. And then when they realize this, they should kind of make them take lessons. So if you see today, for example, like, people, because of greed, they're burning down large areas of the rainforests, or they're destroying the ozone layer, or they're causing the temperatures in the seas to rise, or they are, making people, living off people's weaknesses, vulnerabilities, right? So all of these are fasads, and this has only appeared on earth because of human intervention. So in other words, if you were to remove humans from this system and just left earth like that, earth would not have any problems on there. It would just flow in its normal way that earth flows. Yeah, how the animal kingdom and everything, the ecosystem works. So that's another indication here that the failures of humans is because of offenses they commit against Allah and themselves. Okay, so I think we'll stop there. Let me just see if you guys got anything else. Anybody got anything else you can put inshallah into the comments. Otherwise I think we'll call it a day inshallah. Right, so everything is going to rise and fall, but if we want to be truly successful, then we should follow the original. Yes, definitely. So we should never ever think that we are successful only if we rise. Rising and falling, that's in the hands of Allah. But what we do is we try our best, we strive and struggle and work hard and persevere. And if you think about it, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ in his time, Islam had not seen the growth of Muslims in his time was like small compared to the growth of the Muslims in the time of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman. Right? So, this isn't a measure, like we said earlier on, it's not a measure of the outward success that we have of this surah. Allahumma zid fazid. Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. So again, have another go at reading this surah. Try to see other things as well, because there's so many things in this surah. One of the overarching themes of this surah seems to be about the importance of understanding that there's this pattern of how human society works, like a cyclic pattern, a repeated pattern, right? And that repeated pattern will continue all the time in human society. And the main thing Muslims have to always keep in mind is Allah is in control. And if you know that Allah is in control, you're not going to get stressed too much. You're not going to go into like extreme depression, thinking that Allah is not helping us. So you always have in the back of your mind. And the interesting thing in this surah is, like, Rum is mentioned only once in this entire surah, in the Quran actually, not surah, in the Quran. This surah contains the word Rum, and in this surah there's mention about Allah's signs as well. This, you find this in the surah 7 times. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and from amongst his signs, Allah says. And in this surah also Allah mentions about humans are responsible for the bad things that happen in the community as well, in the earth and in the sea as well. Even the sea, even though the humans are not living at sea, the humans are affecting what's happening in the sea as well. And if you think about it, like this verse, when it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, no one would probably have imagined that humans could cause problems at sea, because sea travel wasn't as widespread as it was afterwards. So fasad being on land makes sense, that there's going to be fasad on land, but fasad being at sea is something that people wouldn't have imagined as much. But now it makes sense now. I mean, humans are probably polluting the sea more than they are polluting the land now, with all their rubbish and filth and other things as well. Okay, wa alaikum assalam. Never be equal to those who do not believe in sins. Always turn to Allah for forgiveness and guidance. Rum thought thinks their dominance to be supreme and forever. Pharaoh had this view as well. Okay, interesting. Pharaoh, yeah. And other nations, this particular attitude leads to doom. Okay, yeah. So very, very interesting. I mean, like, it's interesting as well, because it would be interesting if someone could do research on Rum, where the word Rum comes from, the original like usage of the word Rum, or even Rome rather, what Rome actually means. I tried to do some reading, but I couldn't find any authentic sources of what Rome actually means, because that's something indicating there as well. I did find that Rome, it means a superpower or something strong and powerful. And another thing is, Rome was actually considered to be the first Reich. So if you've heard of the Third Reich, the German, Hitler's Third Reich. So the First Reich is considered to be Rome, the Romans. The Second Reich was considered to be, I think it was the Pope or something like that later on, Catholic Pope. And then the Third Reich was considered to be the Nazis. So it's like, look what happened to them. Yeah. So again, these are things that maybe you can look into. I don't know. I mean, historic reports of how societies have risen and fallen as well. That's another thing. Also, another thing that maybe you can look into as well is these signs that Allah mentions. For example, like humans being created from the soil. What's the significance of this in this surah? Significance of humans being compatible with each other when it comes to procreation. What's the significance of this? Humans, or Allah creating the skies and the earth. What's the significance of this in this surah? Allah creating sleep in humans, humans being able to sleep. What's the significance of this in this surah? Or Allah creating lightning, and thunder. What's the significance of this? Preservation of the skies and the earth, keeping them all held together. What's the significance of this? So all these are the 7 signs. Something you can look into for next time, I think. That might be a good idea. Okay, also, this idea of do not change, or la tabdil, there's no change in the creation of Allah. What is the significance of this in this surah? So, I mean, some of these things are quite difficult. I've been trying to look through them as well. So maybe you guys can have a go as well, looking at these things, inshallah. Okay, so anything else? What does the word mawadda signify compared to hub? Ayah 21. So that's in Surah Ankabut. You're referring to Surah Ankabut. So mawadda is a kind of like it's like a kind of a love that you have, which is with emotion as well, and there's some sort of like a mutual thing going on. That's mawadda, wood. A wood. So it's like kind of like emotional, more intimate, whereas hub can be general, just like you love something. So and the mawadda is like a more kind of like mutual, like we said, it's a social, bringing things together as well. So like we said about the mushriks, their shirk system is gelling them together, but they're being gelled with fake love. So it's like the mawadda that they have. And the mawadda in this surah that's mentioned is actually mentioned again, but it's the love that's between the spouse. Between husband and wife, the mawadda that they have. So it's like this kind of natural sort of like love that they have between each other, which is not necessarily, you can say, like a lustful kind of love or anything like that. It's more of like just like getting on with each other, that kind of love. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I think I'll just call it a night, inshallah. No questions? Okay, I think that's it. I think you guys got no questions. So inshallah, I will see you guys next time then. So next time, prepare. I don't know when the next session will be. Might be in a week's time. Might be more than that. But prepare anyway. Hopefully, inshallah, next time we can have some more discussions on things as well. Alright, so Jazakallah khair, and I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.